All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today for our virtual lunch hour. Today we're going to be talking about craftivism, and we're going to be spending the hour with Nina Barbuto, and she's with us today. We're really excited to have her because she is the has a passion for art, new media, and social learning, and so this led her to found Assemble. It's a community space for art and technology back in 2011. And on her own, Nina works in a variety of media, including architecture, film, sound, and installation, and explores the idea of recycling noise into the system and elevating the vernacular to the spectacular. So she also co-founded I Made It Market, which has a special place in my heart. I used to be a vendor at I Made It Market before I started Protect BT. I had a little small business, sewing business, and it's kind of how I learned how to do what I'm doing now. Some of what I learned with the help of other crafters. So thank you so much for joining us today, Nina. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you, Jillian. It's so great to be here virtually with you all, and also too, like it's so great that one thing can like domino effect other change, right?
That's
Never really think about that. You're like, I'm doing a thing, I hope this works, but really like magically makes all these other things happen too.
I know, right? Because had it not been for the I Made It Markets and all the stuff, all the people that I met there, and all the stuff that I learned there, I wouldn't have known how to really do the outreach that started this organization. Because I'm a founding member of this organization, so it is very much a domino effect, and I'm excited because this topic of craftivism is one that's really kind of close to my heart. I love to craft and make things. And I was listening to a podcast, and I believe it was the TED Talk podcast with PBS. I was listening to this podcast, and they were talking about this idea of craftivism, and it really interested me because I like to make crafts, but I am an extrovert. I'm the type of person that'll get up and talk to people, but I know that I'm not like there's other people that don't feel comfortable with that. So this idea of craftivism was presented in this webinar as a way or a podcast as a way for folks that are that introverted personality to show their support for an issue. And so that's why we wanted to have you on to kind of get your perspective on the issue and to really talk about it a little bit more in depth. So Patrick, do you want to go to the next slide, and Nina can talk a little bit about craftivism?
Yes. So, and craft, this, I think, well, I want to say we've always been making things as long as we've been human beings. And I hope even after we become cyborgs or whatever our, our body hybrids become, that we're still making stuff, right? And like through, over time, especially through, let's say, like industrialization, we as people were separated from the things that we made. Through consumer, it's like you are the consumer and no longer the producer. And really, there's roots of this within the 70s, the 1970s, but like let's say like the late late 90s, early 2000s was when this like craftivism was starting to bubble up again, and people were starting to get more digitally involved, and we're so digitally involved now, which is like ridiculous. But the not the backlash, but like the reaction to it was, what can I do with my hands? And you start to see a rise of like the like craft mafias or like craft markets, right? Like Handmade Arcade started like over 15 years ago, I believe. And like they were definitely around in 2007 and like had been around for a few years at that point. And like there was other like folks who were like getting into this whole indie thing. Etsy had just started like coming into itself. And there were things like Make Magazine that were coming into play, and Maker Faire, and who were maybe more on the like, oh, I can 3D print this now versus just like whittle this out of wood. And all this, I don't know if everybody remembers what the early 2000s was like, right? So we had 2000, 2001, lots of stuff happened. September 11th happened, right? So, and that really significantly changed the culture of how we interact with each other, and especially like how we get on airplanes and how we like move through spaces and security, right? And we are removed from each other, right? Because these layers of security. And people started really bringing up their voice, I think. And again, not the only time in history, but like people started really holding on to like, what can I do? I'm so upset with what's happening around me, and I feel like I have no control. But what you can control might be between these two things that you got at the end of your arms, right? Like, and two, like maybe if you don't have hands, like there's other ways that you can create, right? Like it's like what I can do, what I can make, what I can create. Could I make change? Versus like being disassociated from it. And so we have folks like Mary Callahan and Baumstark and all these lovely folks who like come together and start building this like Craftivism manifesto. And I welcome you all to read it. And you can see like the highlighted parts. And they talk about within this Craftivism manifesto, right? That how craft has been seen mainly as passive or quote unquote female. There's a lot of gender stereotyping within Craftivism, and I'm going to show a slide on this too. But like thinking like it doesn't have to be that way, but it's like how do we actually work together? Or within the quote unquote feminine, like the collective natures that come from, let's say, it's not passive, but it might be more intentional and more opportunities for people to see themselves as ones who can make change because of the scale. Jillian, can I throw a question to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Through your own crafting and making, do you find that you have made change? Or like what kind of changes do you try to make?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that I really try to make change with the stuff that I make because I make like primarily kids clothing, and I'll do like masks and capes and things like that. And so when I was making those things, my goal was to just make children happy. I had children myself, and I just wanted to make kids happy, and it seemed like these things made them happy and kind of sparked their imagination, and enabled them to have this other persona for a little bit and kind of use that imagination for fun. So my the one of the driving forces of what I did was that I could see a kid look at what I made and just like their eyes would light up, and they would just feel really hopefully inspired to go out and play a role. So that's kind of what I hope the change that I made brings some joy to some kids.
And like to restate that, even like you were helping to maybe even like give validation to the identity that that child was thinking of becoming, right? Like that that they could be seen for what they wanted to be seen, even regardless of the costume, right? But that they can also have like a prefigurative moment where they're imagining what they're becoming, and like giving them that path. And two, like it's like, did you see the things that you were creating out there in the world, or were you like, I don't see it, I need to make it?
So sometimes I saw them out there in the world and I was like, okay, I need to recreate this. But then sometimes, you know, once I got into doing like making, so I made a lot of stuff with my sewing machine, with embroidery and applique, and I realized like instead of just putting stuff on t-shirts, I could make like 3D stuff, like I said, little like superhero masks and stuff that the kids could really love. Um, and so like that kind of, I was like, oh, I didn't really realize I could do all this, and this is really awesome. I don't know. That was my experience, and I know that everyone that crafts that I talk to has like a different experience and kind of a different motivation for why they do what they do, but they all love what they do, you know.
And it sounds, Jillian, that you were building your confidence through making. Uh,
Yes, absolutely. And I never thought I'd be doing this type of work. And I think had I not engaged in the I Made It markets and not engaged in the, you know, like learning how to get a following online with Facebook and, you know, a marketplace and all that networking, I wouldn't have had the skills I have for this job to be successful. So I'm really thankful of my time, you know, with that. So, yeah.
it and it's like, again, like the things that you do might trigger, or in a positive way, or inspire, I should say, seed, not trigger, but like should can seed so many others. And I some one line that was popping up to me on in the manifesto, right, which I, again, this is from a while ago. I think this is from over 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I should probably know the date. I'm sorry. I can tell you. I had it in my head earlier, but you know, craftivism is about creating wider conversations about uncomfortable social issues. So we are at a time like racial injustice is not new, right? And environmental justice and how it's connected to racial justice is not new. And all these things, like we've been knowing about it, but like this is our time. Like think, like how do we create the situations where we can communicate not just verbally,
Yeah.
but through our making, or the, you know, yes, non-verbally, but also like through all the different things.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of what got me thinking about this is a really unique way for people to express their feelings on a subject, because you're right, these are really uncomfortable issues, you know, for a lot of people. And so finding something you're comfortable with, um, in order to express that, I think is a great thing. Um, Tell me a little bit about the next slide we have here.
Oh yeah.
Can we
And
hop to that one? Do you have anything else to
totally.
mention for this?
um and sorry, I could get talk about that first slide a lot. I'm sorry. So what do you see when you look at these two covers? These are two different magazine covers.
So I see shoes and I see science. That's what I see.
Awesome. um what else do you see?
Um, I see kind of a sci-fi versus like a very earthy background.
And what about the humans?
The humans are very happy in their two different spaces. I don't know what.
So,
Yeah.
or one might be a woman, maybe, or
Mhm.
a femme identified person, and then the other one, it's Adam Savage, but Adam is a white cis man, right? So we have two, um let's say, like white people on covers of magazines that were of making and creating. You can even see like make is a darker red, and like craft is kind of pink. um
Mm.
and like there's so much signaling, right, within this. And now granted, these two magazines don't no longer exist as print copy anymore.
Mhm.
um and Make Magazine, the company, put out both of these, right? It's the same font, and they didn't say like, notice how it's like transforming traditional crafts versus technology on your time. Isn't crafting making? Isn't making crafting? Why
Yeah.
why do we need to have two, like, the different sections, right? Like, it's not saying that in Make magazine there's urinals and in Crafts magazine there's not, because that's really the only difference between bathrooms, everybody. Other than that, they're all the same. But thinking, like, what is this saying to us? That, like, we, like, women, what should women be, right? Or what would a femme identified person do? Like, is it not that science? Is it not having, like, some crazy adventure on the moon? Is it like we're at the park with our pupper who happens to be super cute? But thinking, like, how we're projecting makes a big difference. And I encourage you all to check out Leah Buckley's, I was going to put a slide of this and I couldn't find the right one, but the right image. But the Leah Buckley, who is really like the founder of LilyPad Sewable Circuits, which you can sew LEDs. It's so great. She did two presentations, and I believe some of my next slides or later get to this, but she did two presentations where she cataloged all of the Make magazine covers, and she did it twice and there wasn't much change. There's like, she had 2 years in between it, but she said of those covers, there was only 20% women and still 0 women or people of color, which is not the world, right? Like our world is made up of actually, like, the global majority is not white. So, like, we're projecting something that is not true. And there were more inanimate objects than there were Black inventors and makers and scientists, which is like, what? So we have to be cognizant of, like, what we are sharing out there in the world and what are we projecting for people to see. How are people seeing themselves as someone who can make? And so thinking even within, again, bringing it back to craftivism, how are we showcasing and sharing not just like all types of making as a means for making change? And you can jump to the next slide. So I wanted to give some, like, more, let's say, classic examples of craftivism. You might have seen these around. So this one is Knitta Please. And it was a movement more in like 2007 where everyone was covering stuff with knit bombing. Jillian, do you remember?
Oh yeah, I remember. And actually, I still see some knitted stuff here and there. When I'm driving, there's one house that always has knitted stuff, and I love to look at it.
And, like, this is an easy way. It's like, let's say, non-invasive street art. Graffiti is also great. There's also green graffiti that you can do with moss and plants. But, like, giving a telephone pole a koozie, like, it's leaving your mark in a new way, right? And it's also taking that, like, what is knitting, right, and making it fun and avant-garde. And granted, this one example from Knitta Please does not have any words per se. You can see in the other one, it has the word vote. And so, have you seen those before?
I have. And, I feel like without, well, especially like the koozie, without without someone using their voice, they're getting their point across. And it's something that, it's not necessarily permanent, but it's eye-catching, it's pleasing to look at, and someone's making a statement, and they're making, in my mind, they're making a really positive statement. And that's what I love about this type of stuff, this craftivism, that it's really powerful because it's positive and because it's eye-catching. And people are going to see it and be like, oh, what is that? It invokes that sense of, I need to stop and look at this. And getting people out of their bubble, I think sometimes is the hardest thing to do. People are walking down the street you know, they're doing their own thing. They're not paying attention to what's going on around them. But you see something like this and you're like, oh, I need to stop and look at that because that's really fun to look at.
And like it helps to elevate your observation skills and like connect you back with everything else versus like your productivity, right? So like
Yeah.
we're so programmed for the world that we live in, right? So like how do we deprogram ourselves to like be present and to experience it more? I like these two examples because they're doing similar but different things, and I would say like they're probably 10 years apart from when they were created. And something you brought up, Jillian, I want to comment on like how it might not last forever. And do you really want it to last forever if it's going to inspire change?
Right.
Speaking about things that pop up, you can go to the next slide. And I know that Carrie probably will be like, that's not the best photo, but I think she looks so cute. I stole it from the internet. But so one of the reasons why within starting I Made It Market with Carrie Nardini, we like how we started it is that we were both at a like art and craft fair selling thing at CMU, and I was selling some very wild and inappropriate for children potentially earrings that were flowers that were very suggestive. We'll just put that there. And Carrie was selling her zipper pulls at the time. And then we just started talking, and we were talking about markets and how fun this was. And we're like, we should just do this. Let's make something happen. And a few months later, we put, maybe even a month later, we pulled together our first I Made It Market at the Garfield Artworks on Penn Avenue in Garfield. And it was real chill. Like there was maybe 10 vendors, but the idea was like, well, how do we like get people to like sell their wares and to make this like micro economy, right? Where people are buying, like you don't need the big corporation to tell you what you need, but it's like, hey, I know how to make this. You could buy it from me. Let me get, you know, like we're doing this on our own level. It was really like part of the idea of selling it. And like people been making stuff, right? And Etsy was still like, do I trust Etsy? Like, you know, like it was still nascent at that time in 2007. Or like people didn't have PayPal yet. Like not everyone had PayPal or trusted PayPal the way that we let PayPal have all of our information now. But thanks, Elon. And we did it as a, well, I made it. Let's start there. I Made It, the name is not just like you as the person selling, you made it, but also too by participating, like showing up and being part of being someone who buys stuff. You made it happen as well. It is like this relationship between both, like understanding like one needs the other. Like you can make stuff all day, but if you don't have someone to buy it, or if you have needs that you need to buy something for and you don't have that product, like there's an incomplete system there. So like how can we connect people to support each other? And pop-ups, thinking like how can this thing like go from place to place to ignite and inspire others along the way, and almost like the whole like golden goose, but not so much, like where people like are Pied Piper, one of those stories, where people see it and then they can see themselves as being a part of it, and it has grown so big. And Carrie has it's mainly Carrie's show now. I've had to take a large step back because I have something else that takes up a lot of my time, but Carrie has done an amazing job in making this a community and a space that is not only inspiring, like a physical and, you know, like non-physical space that's inspiring, but like helping people. I feel like helping people like yourself, Jillian, to see what you could be doing.
Yeah, you know what? I really connect with what you said, Nina, because when I actually went to my first I Made It Market. I can't remember where it was, but I went and I was like, I could make this stuff. I can do this. And I hadn't picked up my sewing machine for years because I was so like, I was working and doing that. And then when I had my children, I stopped working for the first time since I was 14 years old. So I was like, oh, this is a totally different thing for me. And I found out that like every moment that I had to myself, I wanted to do something that was for me. And so that's why I picked up my sewing machine again and started making things. And it was because I was really inspired by going to an I Made It market. I remember it was around the holidays and my friend invited me, and I was like, I've never been to one, but it sounds like something totally up my alley. And then I went, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then within a year, I was selling because I was like, oh yeah, I need to do this. And I got to say, I had some really great support, from family and my husband. And at the time my kids were little, so it was like they were my inspiration, being little ones, to make things for little ones. And sometimes I get sad because they're so big now, and I'm like, oh, but occasionally I still make stuff for people, and I love to make stuff, and I love the kind of the community that Carrie's built there, with even with the pandemic and everything going on, a lot of makers, a lot of events have been canceled,
Yeah.
and so I give a shout out to Lucy from Belmo Neely. She was a mentor of mine. Actually, I have one of her necklaces on I was playing with.
Beautiful.
I didn't even think about it today when I put it on that I was putting her jewelry on, but she recycles old jewelry and old stuff and makes it look like really new and amazing and fashionable. But just kind of thinking about, um, you know, uh, doing something different, and doing something for yourself. And I think that that's also what craftivism does. If you want to do something and make a change in your community, it's a way to do it. That you don't have to be out there and going to rallies and speaking on a megaphone. You can knit something, or sew something, and maybe make someone else happy in the process.
Totally. Totally, totally. And I also, something, thinking about it as like an economic thing, like something that was super exciting was to see folks leave their jobs that they did not like, that did not feed their souls, to do this full time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And now that COVID has brought about a whole new economic hardship for a lot of folks. It's kind of sad that a lot of these events are canceled, but I think that the I Made It community has really done a great job of adapting to that, and to making it a little different. So I don't know. I love to still engage, online, and with those folks, because even though I'm not making and selling anymore, I'm still making, but I'm not selling anymore, because of this job really took up all of my time, you know.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So, but I think that, that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on today, Nina, and why I wanted to talk about this issue, because it's almost like fusing these two issues together, fusing the issue of environmental and social justice together with together with, making, and making something that will make people happy and make you happy.
And I threw some extra slides in here about Assemble just now, but and you
Yeah.
can go to the next slide to just show like an example of, like what does this look like? And like we would pop up into empty spaces or abandoned spaces, or like places that were forgotten by commerce, right? Like it no longer served the corporation, or it no longer served the production of profit, being like, well, what happens when we take it over, right? So I'm sure that maybe the market that you came to was in maybe an empty Bakery Square before. We had so many at Bakery Square where there wasn't even a concrete floor
Right.
put in.
Yeah. I remember just the walls that had like just the spackle on them. They weren't, and there weren't very many walls at all. It was, a big open space, which was really nice. Um, And I do want to give a little shout out to Trish. She's on. She's been following along with the conversation, and she got, before I did. She got the whole cover thing. The craft versus the make covers and why they're different. And she is a retired school teacher, so she really knows a lot of this stuff, and I'm really happy to call her a wonderful member and friend. So thank you, Trish, for tuning in. And if folks have questions, please, type your questions in. We want the interaction with the audience. And there goes my phone. We want the interaction with the audience so we can, ask Nina questions that come up as we're talking. So don't be afraid to type something into the chat here, and Mary is going to be helping to make sure we keep that all ready. And so tell me a little bit more about what they're selling in this photo, Nina.
I think she's selling like bath bombs.
Yeah.
And I believe this is I forget her store name. It's like Firefly, and actually from Erie. I could be totally wrong on this, but I have one of the last I made at markets I was able to go to, which was around the holidays. I was able to buy some really good coffee scrub because I need all the energy I can get on every part of me. But I even though like I'm not involved and I made it now, like I go to buy all my Christmas gifts and holiday gifts because it's so easy just to be like one-stop shopping.
Yeah.
And being able to give something that was like locally made, and I'm able to support other people. Like we see a lot of people just supporting other folks now. Like it's so amazing to see how many people are like, hey, I need help paying my bills, and other people are stepping up. But it's like that, but without, it's like that type of support and sharing is kind of in the same vein as like, how do we support each other to like pursue the things that we like to make, as well as like fulfill a need, right? Sometimes we just need that connector.
Yeah, and I think that's so important right now, especially with the economy not doing well, and just to support other people, support other humans. And I think it also kind of goes along with our mission, at least not so much with Protect PT, because it's really focused on shale gas development and oil and gas, but really with the Promote PT initiative to recycle, to reuse things is a big part of this whole initiative of making. There's a lot of people that recycle stuff and reuse things, repurpose things, like Lucy does with the jewelry. And I think that that's a really wonderful thing. And then to be able to have an income from it, an unlikely source of income from a skill that maybe you learned as a child. I learned to sew as a child, and I know that a lot of folks don't sew anymore. It's really a lost art, which is just a shame because it's so much fun. So yeah, I think that there's just so much community, and that we talk a lot about that, community, and needing that sense of community in order to have the positive change you want to see in your community. So if we can try to go to the next slide, I think that I'm hoping that this will.
Oh wait, I actually.
That's okay. We'll need. I think Patrick needs to refresh a little bit.
If you refresh, you'll see. I'm sorry, I slipped in two little slides that I was like, I should probably put these in here.
Yeah,
because I didn't realize that I didn't.
Yeah, they
sorry,
came
everybody.
Up. That's all right.
But while this is happening, let me tell you that like what you were saying, Jillian, also inspires me to think of like that the sustainability of like how we sustain ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go to the next slide. But also like how we come to the table with cups filled with something, right? Like, and like so much of the time we're told that we're not enough, that we need something else to make us full. But like when can actually acknowledge like, oh, you learned a skill when you were a child that you can, maybe you're not using it in the same way, but you're transforming it and applying it to today and the issues that you have today, that you're being validated and seen as the full person that you are, versus like one who needs something else to be that, right? Like, again, thinking about like how we're projected at, and like thinking within the environment, like how can we sustain ourselves without by reusing, by using what we know, by reusing what we have, and how we can continuously change that to evolve with us.
Yeah, and actually we have a question that this is so timely. Lois is tuning in, and she says, is the mere presence of this a help for failing malls who cannot draw customers? Any obstacles there? Sorry if this is already discussed, but I'm a little late. That's okay. It's so funny that you said that, because we're at Protect PT and Promote PT. We're involved in a Reimagine Turtle Creek Watershed and Airshed Communities Plus initiative with a bunch of other organizations in the area. One of the things that we're talking about is some potential future projects, maybe even around some of the malls that are in our neighborhoods that are failing. And we had a conversation earlier today about how we can make that buildings more sustainable and more community like, and this topic came up in that conversation. And I was like, I remember I made it markets when we went into spaces that were empty and occupied those spaces. And, it was income for the person who owns the property. It was income for the people that were selling. It was, it was like you were saying, Nina, this micro economy. And I think that's a really awesome, effort to be able to put out there.
And two, even thinking about these malls, these empty spaces, like, are there places for those who don't have places, right? Like, this is space. How can this space provide maybe you need learning pods, right? Like, thinking about how we need to be distant from each other, but like still potentially together. Like, can schools expand to these spaces, or like, are there opportunities for startups or just like ideas or things to happen in these spaces, or like what else? Do they become giant gardens? Like, who knows? Is another Phipps? Maybe not, but we'll see what happens. It truly think what can happen here, and what is letting your imagine go, right?
Yeah, and I think that the more we do that as a society, the better off we're going to be. Because then we can start thinking as more holistically. We can start thinking more as, okay, how can we as a community come together and make this better? Tell us a little bit about Assemble and why you started this and why it's precious to you.
Oh yeah. It's become most of my whole life. Which, Jillian, I don't know if you've noticed, like when you start a nonprofit, it kind of takes over your whole world.
Oh yeah.
But that's not my intent forever. But so Assemble, and we are a community space for arts and technology located in Garfield, not too far from Children's Hospital. I know everybody knows where that is. And we build confidence, that's why I winked earlier, through making, by uniting communities of artists, technologists, makers, and learners, right? And so really like bringing people together. Jillian, just because you're the only person that can really respond to this right now, do you identify as an artist?
Yeah, I think I do. I don't think I would have before I started making stuff at I Made It Market, but yeah, I think I do now. I think I just maybe identify more as a maker. I make stuff.
You can be both, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be an either or. It could be a yes and. And what about a technologist?
Yes, I definitely identify as a technologist.
And what about a learner?
Yes, absolutely.
So I like to ask, like, whenever I'm doing like presentations, I'm like, who here identifies as this? And you raise your hand. And people tend to raise their hand at least once. And we say all these things because these are portals for people to find themselves in Assemble. And you might not, you might come in one way and leave out another, or like after like years, you find like, oh, I'm now all these things. But it's like you can really become what you want. And within the within artist, makers, technologist, those are titles that we, let's say, like identify with, or someone else has called us. But with being a learner, we have the opportunity to become whatever we would like to be, or what we need to be, or what we don't even know exists yet, right? And that is truly our mission. And like it actualizes in many different ways, such as after school and summer camps and programs for adults and things in schools and other after schools. But ultimately, all this work is to really help our vision to come into play. And our vision, right, is what we want to see beyond Assemble. And we want to see a world of diverse neighborhoods of empowered people who can create, connect, learn, and transform together, right? Like making that change. And like, I know that some of the work that you were telling me about, Jillian, about the teen program, like connecting people so that they can make the change in their community and be empowered. And I think craftivism comes into this too, where it's like, I have the power, like Shira, or is it more He-Man? But it might, like, you have the power, right, to like make the change. You have this energy. Everything we do has an impact, regardless if it's like just sitting in this chair. I'm making an impact right now somewhere. So like what we can do with our choices to create, learn, connect, and transform together through our actions. And then the next slide is our values, which I just want to hit off some of those really quickly, because like we talk about building agency, and it's like, it's not just about making, but it's like, how do you actually build that confidence so that change is in their hands, for other people's hands, and like seeing people for who they are and how they want to be seen within respect, learning through that making, right? So not just like what I'm doing right now is like talking at people, but like actively participating and having the opportunity to try. And then the value that I practice on a daily basis, failures as opportunities. It's great to have that as a value, because then you're like, I'm just learning. But like, especially now with like COVID, and you're like, oh man, how do I write this policy or procedure? And I'm like, I have no idea what to do. I'm like, like, I'm not, how are you supposed to come up with the stuff? But like being able to learn collectively too. And I think that collaboration works into that, where it's like, you can, and I also want to say, within failures is the opportunity. Not all of us have the privilege to fail, and still have support. And so within Assemble, we want to make sure to provide that safety, like to provide that space that's a safe space to fail, so that learning can happen, even though one might not have the opportunity to try that, right? Like, it's like, do I start a business, or do I pay my heating bill or feed my children? Like, you might have to choose that, but like, you don't have the opportunity, that privilege to make that risk. But how can we create a space where we can make sure that people can sustain themselves, at least with us, so that they can try that stuff? And then with an open invitation, we welcome everyone, right? Maybe not, we are a peanut-free space, so I have to say, we don't welcome peanuts, but we welcome every type of human, and maybe cyborg, that people can come and create with us. Now, it's as also if they will respect other people too, of course, So we are also glitter comfortable, as you can see behind me.
I love it. And I love, like, I'm hearing you talk, and I think that like today, especially youth, this is so important for young people to learn how to go through this process where they are understanding these things. And so tell me a little bit about what you guys do with youth and some of your youth programs.
Totally. And I have, we can go. I have some of those examples. Let's go to the next slide. Because again, it's through this making. And again, I referenced Make Magazine, and I wrote this specifically that way. So to comment on it, and at Assemble, we very consciously like try to shift that up. And you can go to the next slide where, making should be reflective of everyone, especially those that we do not see. There's so many people who have been erased out of history. You have all been robbed of what actually has happened.
Yeah.
And so we have the opportunity as an out of school time learning space to say, like, let's actually talk about what you don't get taught in school. I can't say that it's like learning the truth or whatever, but like, let's see the unseen, right? Let's know about this. Like, everyone was like, what? The Tulsa massacre? It's like, yes, no one is taught that in school, right? Like, that is a terrible event in our history. We should all know about this.
Yeah.
Not just because, like, we all know, a lot of us know about 9/11 because we experienced it. But like, what about all the things that happened along the way? We should all know. It is it's our collective history. But also, let's think about our collective future and who is there and how people can see themselves as part of it. Another thing that I'm always inspired by is my friend Alicia Wormsley's artwork that has really exploded across the country at this point, where she did she uses it in these words in screen printing and more, but her billboard that she had saying that there are Black people in the future, and how just saying that can be a revolutionary thing. It's like, you want to say, like, duh, there's obviously Black people in the future, but like, where are they in the things that represent the future, right? How are we keeping people, like, how are we seeing people and helping them to be seen and to know that they matter, right?
Yeah.
Through that, through those opportunities. Like, the environment is everybody's.
Yeah.
And there's we have, some of us have to step up more than others because we can't.
That's right. That's right. And I think that issues of racism and talking about inclusion of all is really important, especially in areas where you do have, you have environmental racism. It's here in Pittsburgh, and we see it. We see it in communities that we go into and talk to folks that have been impacted for a long time by air pollution. We see it all the time. And how do you give these people a voice? And I love that you're giving people a voice and letting people have this space to create and to be themselves, and to make something that is for them. And I really love that mission. It inspires me.
Thanks, Jillian. The kids inspire me. It's true. They like come up with stuff. And actually, the next slide is a great project that some of our kids did a few years ago, where there's a little park in Garfield that a really sad event happened. An 18-year-old was shot and killed at the park over an argument, right? So like, this is why also social emotional learning is so helpful, and like also understanding traumatic, how to learn within a trauma informed care situation as well is important to weave all these things in. It's not just about the tech and the science. You need to know about the whole person, how everybody's learning. But our program, Girls Maker Night, at the time it was called Tinker Squad, the girls decided to work on a redesign of the community park, which is the Nelson Mandela Peace Park, where they used hummingbird robotics to make this prototype, which you see here. Where they're, oh my goodness. They did it so that when you would get close to it, it would say, "Welcome to the park." And so they learned how to use programming. They were using, modeling and like how to make this happen, and how to use all those skills, right, to like make the change that they wanted to see. And like, then every time that they went to the park, they could say like, "Can you imagine what this could be like?"
I love it.
And then even on like a smaller scale, you can go to the next slide, like through programs like our Utopia program, Utopia, and like making the world that you want to see, like kids communicating to others of like, and making even like, let's say, protest signs and posters that say what, encouraging words to others, and adding some electronics with it,
I love it.
Wouldn't it be amazing, Jillian, if like as a child someone was like, yeah, you should totally be yourself?
Yeah, for sure. And I encourage my kids to be themselves. And they very much are. And I think it has inspired them to do things that are impactful, not only for our community, but also in their lives. When we started taking them to things like, going to Harrisburg and taking them to rallies, I was just taking them along for the ride, like, because I didn't have a babysitter. But what I realized is that they are picking up on that, the importance of us being there and the importance of the message. Um, it's really cool. It's really cool to see, like, kind of kids develop that sense of strength, and that sense of like they want to do something for their community. They want to make a difference. So it's really impactful.
And two, by bringing your kids there, you're helping them to see that their voice matters.
Absolutely.
Their voice is part of that crowd, part of that volume.
Yes, and actually, that's funny that you say that, Nina, because the one time we went to to Harrisburg, and we told this story before. The one time we went to Harrisburg, my son really wanted to speak. Like, there was a press conference, and he hadn't signed up ahead of time. I didn't know he wanted to speak. They were just along for the ride, and he really wanted to speak, and he was really mad. He was mad that he didn't get a chance to speak, and he was like, mommy, I wanted to speak. And I said, well, it ran over the press conference. I didn't sign you up ahead of time. I'm really sorry, buddy. And so we went upstairs, and then we went up to the governor's office, and we were trying to get in to see the governor with all these kids to hand them a petition, and they wouldn't let us in. And he was like, he was just like so fed up. He was like, nobody's listening to me downstairs. Nobody's listening to me upstairs. And then because he said something, because he spoke up and used his voice, the kids got to go in and see the governor. And then when he saw the governor, he told him to stop making excuses, that we need clean air and water. And I feel like, had he not had that experience, kind of like that, like you were talking about, the ability to fail, like, had he not had that experience that he failed to get his message across, he wouldn't have had, like, the initiative to come and like speak up when it was most important. And,
Yeah.
like, kids have this ability. We need to like foster it and, harness it as much as possible to make social change in our world.
And like we are the same people. We are the same human beings that we were as children. There's not like oh, you're no longer a child now. Like those feelings and those emotions are valid and real from like the day that you pop out to the day that you are no longer breathing. And so like thinking like those, and like he's going to remember that for the rest of his life maybe, and like how does that inspire him? But also too, think about like how many kids are thinking this and feeling this, and they're told things like shut up, I'm busy, or like like how do we make space for kids to communicate beyond just to their grown-ups that they have, right? And like giving them the tools to make a website, or to make a robot, or like make the art, and then also to connect with other people so that they're able to make what they want. Because really, like, I mean, I'm only 36, but I feel like I'm really old at this point. And like the world is theirs, right? Like right now, it's mainly like everyone who's born in 1984 on is like just cleaning up the mess. But like, that we can have, and like hopefully everybody else will actually help us to make a better world.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
We actually have another question from Lois, and we're running out of time here, so I want to make sure we get, because I know that you have other commitments today. So it says, Lois asks, could this be called a business incubator? That's a really good question.
um, maybe not a business incubator, but an idea incubator, because thinking like this may or may not give someone profit, but it might make change. So profit and change don't have to go hand in hand. And I don't want to be, there are business incubators out there that do wonderful jobs, such as Ascender, and stuff that's happening in the, what is it, the IW, the Innovation Works. And I would even say Prototype is a wonderful, like they have an incubator program, but like this might not be a business that we're encouraging kids to do. It might just be something that's happening in their neighborhood down the street. We don't want to stop kids from seeing themselves as someone to create a business, but like it might not need to be something for profit. It could be something that's just like the small acts to make something happen. But that's a great question.
Yeah.
I have a few slides that I want to share though before we run out of time.
Yes.
Is that okay, Jillian? Because I think it'll really set people off.
Yep. Go for it. Is it the next one?
Okay. So next one. Sharing this lovely quote. You might have heard it before, but I use this every time I talk about Assemble. Once you learn to read, you will be forever free. Frederick Douglass said this. And thinking about this, where it's like people did not have, it was illegal for Black people, specifically, enslaved people, which is, we're not even going to touch on that, but like to read, right? And so imagine if someone told you today that it is illegal for you to read, that you're not allowed to read, right? Sometimes you have to break the rules and make something happen. But thinking about reading at that time, the media, right? Like how we would absorb the media, it was really like the input. And so I like to bring this to the 21st century, and you can go to the next slide, where can you ask, once you learn to make, will you be forever free? So it's not just the input, but really more of this dialogue where you're putting things out there as well. Now, are we just making things to make things though? So go to the next slide. Massimo Vignelli has been known to say, or was known to say, what will you make today? And if you've ever been to New York City, you've seen his work. His office created the subway iconography with A, B, C, all the lines. Like so many people have experienced this, have seen it, have it burned into their memories of New York City, right? Total effect on people. But it's not just about the making, but truly the becoming. And you can go to the next slide. So I like to fast forward this to say, what will you be today? So we're not just making stuff, but it's that process. And you can go to the next slide where we can say, oh, never mind, I cut the other ones. But through that becoming, you're saying, I can be a scientist, I can be an artist, I can be a technologist, I can be an environmental engineer, I can change the world through this making and becoming, right?
I love it. And to kind of speak to that a little bit more, we want to talk in the last few minutes about learning how to build teams and change the world. So we have a new project that we're working on, and we're definitely going to get some input from Nina and hopefully some other folks. And we have Lynn Terry, who's Young Voices for the Planet. She's been on our virtual lunch hour, and Jason Hunter Meller. She was on our lunch hour last month or the month after. I can't even remember at this point. Talking about how to make that change in your world. And so we came up with this program that we're just starting, and actually we have our launch on September 11th. We're doing a kickoff webinar, and this program is Team Building for Climate Action, supporting the youth to change the world. So talking about a lot of what we were talking about today, Nina, and just talking about, allowing kids to go through that process and show them how to go through the process of making change, whether it's making something that they're going to then give to a person in power, that craftivism, whether it's, making a video that they're going to then, use to influence folks. That's really big right now. That's something that Lynn Cherry talks about in the work that she does with Young Voices for the Planet. And, but this could be anything. So we're going to go through this process of teaching kids how to do this. And we've found that in our research that this will help them become leaders in their community. It will help we're hoping that it will help foster that leadership and foster, them becoming, more, more in tune adults that, like you were saying, from the time that you are, popped out to the time that you're, passed, you're the same person. And so giving kids the opportunity to make that change and to do the projects that they want to do. And we're just assisting them. We're going to let them decide what projects they want to do. And we're just going to take them through the process of how they can accomplish that. And that's what September 11th at 4:30, we're going to have our webinar kickoff. So everyone that wants to learn about the project can do so, and hopefully sign on and start working on a project of their own.
I think that's a great program that you're going to be doing.
I'm excited. And actually, Patrick, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So every Thursday at noon we're here. And I want to thank Nina for being here today. I love the idea of craftivism. I love the idea of making things and that you're empowering youth. I think that's so important, especially now with all the junk in the world that's going on. There's a lot of toxic stuff out there. And and I just messed up my, hold on one second. I just messed up my thing here. Here we go. There's a lot of toxic stuff out there right now. And it's great to have an inspiring place for kids to be able to voice their concerns and to be themselves and to make something that's really, impactful to them, and to, just a space for that. So thank you so much for providing, the children of Pittsburgh and the adults in Pittsburgh with that space with Assemble. And if you go to the next slide, Patrick, we have a survey. If everyone could please fill out the survey, let us know what you think of the programming that we have and ideas of other things. And then next week, our last slide, next week is going to be, we're going to talk about the economics of fracking, so we're going to go back to fracking and talk with John Detweiler on the economics of fracking. And that's a really timely thing to talk about right now with COVID-19. So thank you so much, Nina. I loved having you. I love the interaction. I love your glitter.
Thank you, Jillian. It was so great to catch up and to talk with you and to walk down memory lane. And
I know,
just keep doing it.
You too, girl. All right. Have a wonderful afternoon. And I hope we'll be talking again soon.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.